And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another installment of my DC Rebirth reading guide series. Today is video 2.1 in which we're going to be covering the Rebirth one-shot, or as we'll see, one-shots. As a quick intro to where this video fits in, we need to remember that I've read the entirety of the DC Rebirth era of comics by DC Comics. That means I've read all 3,370 issues, give or take, and I've been releasing a guide for this era. I started off my releases by tackling all the smaller sections, the out-of-continuity comics, the licensed comics, Deceased, Black Label and so on. And now we're going through the remainder, the 2,724 single issues that make up the core mainstream DC universe of this era. My DC Rebirth guides are actually split into several playlists. There's the playlist for the core DC Rebirth universe only, which is what this is, but there's actually an overarching separate playlist that contains all of my DC Rebirth content. That contains the other spin-off parts of this universe, which are going to have their own playlist, and then also contains other random things, including custom-bound comics, which are also going to have their own playlists. What that means, there's 4 DC Rebirth playlists. One contains everything, and then there are 3 that kind of split out from that, and this is the one that just covers DC core universe content. Finally, I would remind you that before you watch this video, you should really go back and watch the introduction video for this series, which is video 0.0, as it sets the scene for this whole era of comics, as well as explaining how this reading guide follows directly on from my New 52 reading guide, as well as covering some very key concepts that I'm going to be referring to regularly throughout my content. These are ideas such as volumes with a big V and volumes with a small v, and also type P and type J readers. Concepts such as these are key to understanding the videos in this guide. So with no further ado, let's dive into today's video. It is video 2.1, the Rebirth one-shot. I'm showing you on the screen now. This is the front cover. This was the 80-page one-shot that changed everything. It was the end of the New 52. It was the start of DC Rebirth. So let's talk about it. In January 2016, DC tweeted an image of a blue curtain with the word Rebirth on it, teasing the event's sort of release. The next month, they announced Rebirth officially and said that it was going to be a line-wide relaunch of his titles that was going to begin in June 2016, a lot like the New 52 had done 5 years previously. Now, this 80-page one-shot was released on May 25th, 2016, which is what we are going to view as the start of the DC Rebirth era. A very clear, very concrete date. Now, following that, there's a couple of things that happened that are very important to be aware of. Firstly, a couple of major series got renumbered, or rather they reverted back to their legacy numbering. So Action Comics went from issue 52 at the end of the New 52 to issue 957. Detective Comics went from issue 52 at the end of New 52 to issue 934. Multiple series actually shifted to a twice-monthly release cadence. Several series relaunched with brand new issue 1s, which means they launched with new volumes with a big V. Several new series entirely launched as well. Now, 2 days later, on May 27, 2016, DC announced that the DC Universe Rebirth Special would receive a second printing. Now, the first printing had this cover, which is the full wraparound deluxe edition cover. And just so you're aware, if you were to buy the first printing, it was a staple-bound comic with this wraparound cover. Fantastic. The re-release was a square-bound comic, so sort of a hardcover square-bound spine, and it had an updated version of Gary Frank's cover, which was this, which better reveals the outstretched hand of the character in the top right corner. So less than a week later, DC revealed that it would get a third printing, again with a square-bound spine format. Not hardcover, sorry, but it's just like a prestige format with a square-bound spine, because it's quite a thick comic. And a new cover from Gary Frank. That's this cover that you can see here. In addition to that, the first wave of Rebirth one-shots, that's Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, and so on, they also got second printings. And to tell the difference whether you got a first printing or a second printing, the first printing has the blue banner on the top like this. The second printing has the red banner on the top like this. A fourth printing featuring a cover by Ethan Van Sciver was then the next one that they did, and that depicts the scene where Wally West interrupts Batman in the Batcave, and you can see it here. And then eventually there was the fifth and final printing that was announced in August 2016. So like a couple of months later, that had a brand new cover again, this time by Phil Jimenez. That's this image you can see here. Note as well that after this, it was then released as an official oversized hardcover, which was really, really beautiful, a deluxe edition hardcover. However, the normal retail hardcover that you buy from Amazon or somewhere like that doesn't come with a dust jacket. The direct market variant, if you got it directly at your local comic book shop, does have a dust jacket. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now that in and of itself seems really straightforward. This should be the entire video. We've just talked about the DC Rebirth one-shot. However, there's a lot more to talk about when we talk about the DC Rebirth one-shots, because actually what then happened is each series then had a single one-shot opener, and this can be kind of confusing for people that aren't quite familiar with what happened during this period at DC. So for example, there was a one-shot called Batman Rebirth, and that's the cover you can see here. And that is the start of the new volume with a big V, as it were, volume 3. So this is after Batman issue 52 by Snyder and Capullo in the new 52. However, this is called Batman Rebirth 1, and it is followed by Batman issue 1, which I'm showing you the cover of here. And it's very easy to, in your head, just confuse the two. Oh, right, surely that's Batman 1. It's not. So Batman Rebirth 1 was a Batman one-shot, which was set between the Rebirth Universe Special Edition we've just been talking about and the actual Batman issue 1. And it's the same for about 20 odd different lines in the DC universe. And I'll talk through those in a moment. Before I do, just a couple of quick things just to mention as a bit of admin. They did plan to do a Trinity Rebirth one-shot issue for the series Trinity. That was planned for release in August 2016, written by Francis Manapul and so on, but it was never released. So if you can't find it, that's because it doesn't exist, even though it was announced. Also note that Batgirl, even though it started at the same time as all the others, never had a Batgirl Rebirth one-shot. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So in terms of the one-shots, why are they important? Well, they're important because they all get connected in an omnibus in a few moments' time, which we're going to talk about. But what I'll do, I'll talk through the issues that were collected in that omnibus. And keep in mind, these are the Rebirth issues. So to start off with, you've got Aquaman Rebirth, which is followed by Aquaman 1. Then you have Batgirl and the Birds of Prey Rebirth, again, followed by Batgirl and the Birds of Prey 1. You get the gist. Then there's Batman Beyond Rebirth, Batman Rebirth, which I showed you before, Blue Beetle Rebirth is here, Cyborg Rebirth, obviously we're going in alphabetical order, Deathstroke Rebirth, Flash Rebirth, Green Arrow Rebirth is here. We then have Green Lantern's Rebirth, which is a brand new series, and we then have Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps Rebirth, also a brand new series. Hellblazer Rebirth goes there. Then there's Justice League Rebirth, Nightwing Rebirth, Red Hood and the Outlaws Rebirth, Suicide Squad Rebirth, Supergirl Rebirth, Superman Rebirth, Teen Titans Rebirth, distinct to that, just Titans Rebirth, and then Wonder Woman Rebirth. Now, it's worth noting that all of those were collected in a single omnibus called the DC Rebirth Omnibus. You can see the cover of it here. It collected all 21 issues and came out in December 2016. It's worth noting it did not contain the actual main DC Rebirth universe one-shot, the one that launched the whole DC Rebirth universe. It only collected those 21 issues we just talked about. Now, if it was just about those 21 issues, then obviously the thumbnail for this video would have looked like this. But it doesn't look like this. The thumbnail for this video actually looks like this. And the reason is that later on in September 2017, so about 10 months later, they released an expanded version of the omnibus that included an extra 7 issues. And the issues that it included were Batwoman Rebirth, DC Rebirth Holiday Special, which is not to be confused with the 2018 Holiday Special. This is the cover of the 2018 one. Don't get that confused. That one is not part of the omnibus. It also includes the Justice League of America Killer Frost Rebirth special, then the Justice League of America special, the Atom Rebirth special, the Ray Rebirth special, and finally the Vixen Rebirth special, all of which are Justice League of America spin-offs. Now, they were all collected in a single omnibus called the Expanded Edition, which is exactly the same as the previous edition, but had those extra 7 issues. So, honestly, if you've got one, you don't really need the other. In fact, I wouldn't really recommend getting either of them, because just having the initial one-shot issues, it just isn't really just not very coherent. Doesn't really feel very satisfying. If you want a list of them, this is a list of the ones in the normal omnibus, the original omnibus. You can obviously just pause it, screenshot this, whatever you want. And then the one that got released subsequently, the expanded omnibus, added these issues here. In terms of what that means for the New 52, there's something to keep in mind here, and that is that the New 52 was just an era with a couple of major events, literally, worth flagging. Forever Evil and Convergence. But DC Rebirth is a completely different animal. Firstly, when it comes to DC Rebirth, there were, to start with, real-world events. I couldn't make this video without mentioning COVID. Obviously, COVID was a thing. The last year or so of DC Rebirth was happening and being published and being released and being written in the backdrop of COVID-19 and the worldwide lockdown because of the pandemic. It doesn't have a huge impact on the storylines themselves, but it's worth keeping in mind simply because it does cause some changes to the publishing schedules and the publishing dates if you're the sort of person that obsesses about those things. For my money, what's more interesting is what happened in continuity, because in terms of comic events, unrelated to COVID, just in terms of what DC Rebirth was, it contained many more events of differing scales than the New 52 ever did, and several of them reset the status quo and even series numbers in very disruptive ways. This is one of the main reasons that the various maps that we're going to be discussing, as of video 3.1 onwards, are tiered into a high-level map and a low-level map. The reason for that is that to maintain some level of perspective and to avoid getting confused, it's important to always be aware of where you are in relation to some of these massive and landmark events. So for our purpose, the events you need to be aware of, and we'll cover these in huge amounts of detail when we get to them, are the Rebirth one-shot we just discussed, Dark Knight's Metal, which is quite a wide-reaching event, No Justice, which is a relatively short 4-issue event but has an important impact on what happens with the series before it and the series after it, Year of the Villain, which is an absolutely ridiculous, sprawling mess of an event, but I will cover that in detail when we get to it. Event Leviathan, which is specifically something in the Superman comics, but it was kind of intended to have reverberations across the entire DC universe. Heroes in Crisis, which was written by Tom King, and again was meant to have massive impact, but eventually kind of just melted away. Doomsday Clock, which is really the finale of the setup that was set up in the DC Rebirth universe one-shot. And then out of nowhere, Dark Knight's Death Metal, which was penned by Scott Snyder and is the sequel to Dark Knight's Metal. As such, those are the major, the sort of big events. Those are the, give or take, sort of 8 major events. But there are lots and lots of smaller events that are unique to each family, like the Batman family, the Superman family, that sort of thing. And so as a result, for the DC Rebirth reading map, whilst there's going to be one huge map at the end, it's going to be broken down to 12 smaller maps before then. If we look at the 10 sections that comprise the core DC Rebirth reading universe, I've decided that 4 of these sections don't warrant maps. Those 4 sections are New 52 Epilogues, which we did last time, DC Rebirth One Shot, which is today's video, the New Age of DC Heroes, and the Standalone section. That leaves 6 sections that require reading maps, and for each of these I'll be doing these videos by regularly toggling between 2 simultaneous and parallel reading maps. The first of these maps, denoted by the original blue Rebirth banner on the top, is one showing series and events, or rather volumes with a big V and events. This is very useful to set the context in the scene. The second map in each case, denoted by the red Rebirth banner at the top, is a map breaking down everything by individual trade collection, or volume with a small v if you prefer. As there are 6 sections, that means 6 blue maps and 6 red maps, giving us 12 in all. And then finally, at the end of this entire video series, there will also be 2 massive maps for the whole core universe, again split between schematic events and trade paperback collections. And finally, a key part to understanding the events is to understand the rhyme, rationale and reasons behind them. And for that, we're going to need to understand and discuss what was happening behind the scenes with DC in the real world. And for that, we're going to have a separate video, which will be the next one in this series. It's going to be video 2.2, where we talk about the conflicting and competing agendas of the major writers and personalities that shape DC Rebirth and why you need to know about them.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at @IamThomasJudge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.